Since the launch of OHSCA in 2020, we have experienced a great interest in the work that we do. Our movement is growing, and that is a reflection of the great work that our team is doing. We have created great quality content, including a number of high-profile interviews with various conservative personalities. With the anticipated further growth of this group, it is an opportune time to announce a change that will be coming effective May 25th, 2021. During my recent interview with Dahlia Kurtz on SiriusXM Canada Talks, I explained to the audience that I chose to use the pseudonym of Gabe DeSanto when I embarked on this initiative. The reasons for this were many. As a young person with an online presence, I wished to keep my personal identity and professional identity separate at the time. Unfortunately, as discussed in many of my interviews, there is a lot of hate online, especially as relates to political viewpoints. Because of this, I decided to take on the pseudonym of Gabe DeSanto for my online presence. As I approach my last year of high school this fall, now's a good time to end the use of the Gabe DeSanto pseudonym. Effective May 25th, 2021, I will begin using my personal name, Vincenzo Calla, for all future initiatives and for my role of president of OHSCA. We will continue to provide the same quality content and to promote active involvement of young conservatives in Canadian politics. Until May 25th, all initiatives that I am involved in, including interviews and related content, will continue to be presented through the name of Gabe DeSanto. I wish to thank everyone for the continued support of OHSCA, and I look forward to bringing excellent new ideas forward for young, like-minded people. Good morning, everybody. I'm Vincenzo Calla, president of the Ontario High School Conservative Association, and we are glad that you were able to join us today. Today, we have the MP for Thornhill joining us, the Honourable Peter Kent. Before he became an MP, Peter was a journalist for over 40 years in Canada, the US, and around the world. He covered many big stories of the 20th century, including the Berlin Wall, the end of the Cold War, and Nelson Mandela's presidency. He was first elected in 2008 and became the Minister of State of Foreign Affairs, responsible for the Americas. In 2011, he became the Minister of Environment until 2013, and then was elected chair of the House Standing Committee on National Defense in October 2013. He is a strong member of his community, and after many years, he is retiring at the end of his current term. Thank you, Peter, for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We really thank you for joining us today. We know that you're a great, strong MP for the people of Thornhill, and we really thank you for joining us before your retirement, in whether that's in a couple months or a year from now, whenever the next election is. We know that Thornhill's still in good hands. We had Melissa Lansman on our show recently, so we know that.
Excellent.
Yeah, we had her a couple months ago, actually. So yeah, we really thank you for the work that you've done in the past years in government and in opposition. So our first segment is the question and answer segment. All these questions are asked by our high school members across Ontario and across Canada. What is your favorite part about being a Conservative member of Parliament? And this question comes from Evan in Ottawa.
Well, to Evan, I will respond as I hope every member of Parliament would respond, and that's that I get the most satisfaction out of serving my constituency here in the riding of Thornhill. Every MP certainly enjoys the fulfillment one gets in government or in opposition, whether in cabinet or in caucus, in committee, attending to the work of developing public policy. But fundamentally, our responsibility is to represent our constituents, all of our constituents, not just the ones who voted for us, with the issues that they may have, the problems that they need to be solved in areas of federal jurisdiction. You know, with taxes during COVID, there have been a lot of issues with immigration, with visas, with health protocols, and so forth. That's why most of my staff are based in my constituency office in Thornhill. I have one senior staffer in Ottawa, but when we were in government, when I was a minister in Prime Minister Harper's government, I still ensured that we served constituents as they required.
Well, that's the fundamental part of being an MP. You are for your constituents. You work for your constituents. They decide to hire you every 4 or so years. They're the ones that send you to work. And that's the part of that's the most important part, really. That's what all elected officials are for. And people like yourself work really hard in the community. They represent the community well in the House of Commons, and people really need to remember that at election time, that we're choosing the best person for the job. And people like yourself who work extremely well and have the local community of people that work with you in your office, and that's all. I mean, we need to remember that no matter if you're a prime minister or just an MP or a minister
That's
or
right.
whatever, you still have to represent your riding of Thornhill, or when Prime Minister Harper was in power, Calgary Heritage, I believe, and like so
That's right.
many other people that are in government, they need to represent their constituents.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So the next question comes from Jack in Milton, and he asks, representing Thornhill in Ottawa has big responsibilities. What advice do you have as a longtime MP for others who may want to become an MP in the future? And especially for Melissa Landsman. I'm sure you've talked a lot with her about
Uh,
it, but
well, I've known Melissa since I left journalism and entered politics. She worked with me in foreign affairs and in the Department of the Environment. She has knocked on a lot of doors over the years. She is a great communicator. She has a company of her own, a consulting company, and she's very effective in conveying policy messages, speaking to issues of the day, and that's a big part of being a member of Parliament, being able to deliver political party positions, but to also sympathize with folks, with whatever the challenges of their lives might be, individually or as collectively. So I think that she'll be. She doesn't need any advice from me. I'm obviously of an aging generation, and she comes to the election campaign, her candidacy, and I'm quite sure to her seat in the House of Commons, replacing me, with a pretty full kit of tools and capabilities.
well, there's so many great things about having an MP that represents their community. Like we were talking before, that is their job. And people like yourself that have been in government before, like been in a majority government, minority government, you know, all the workings of it so far. And to many other people that want to become MPs, we need to remember, and the people that want to become MPs need to remember that, like we said, the job is the representative in Parliament. You are the voice for the people in your community.
That's
So
right. It's exactly it.
mhm. So, Wesley in Mississauga asks for the third question. As a former journalist, and you've had lots of experience in journalism, and you've seen a lot of how the workings in Canada and the US and around the world, uh, have you seen a rise in political bias in the media since you have left?
Well, absolutely. That's a very good question. And there are some great journalists working in Canada, working around the world. But I'm very satisfied that I was practicing the craft of journalism in the last century rather than this century. Um, uh, Technology has enabled people to share opinions much more widely, either in the directly in the craft of journalism with regards to startups with, blogs and all sorts of social media. But there has also been a tendency for information consumers, younger information consumers, to avoid what we used to call the mainstream media, which tried to hold itself, certainly I did, to what we called in the last century objectivity, fair and balanced. If there was a story or an issue, it was the job of the journalist to report all of the facts and leave that any decision making to the information consumers, whether it was newspapers, radio, or television. Today, because of decline of mainstream media, the fact that advertising has fragmented, that few consumers, many fewer consumers are actually buying newspapers or watching conventional television newscasts or consuming radio news. There's much more a tendency to get information from either 24/7 talk radio, talk TV, which is mostly opinion. You know, in the United States, Fox versus CNN, or in Canada, to a lesser degree, CBC, which I believe has strayed into partisan journalism, very selective narrative telling, leaving out many aspects of news stories that I, as a conservative, am very disappointed with. And then again, there's social media, anti-social media, which politicians have to use to communicate, but it is a terrible arena for extreme opinions, extreme partisan side taking. And I think that if information consumers, if the younger generations, and I'm not saying this in a patronizing way, but if all people who have been distracted by social media at the expense of consuming serious journalism, serious balanced journalism, don't work a little bit harder on where they get their news information, whether it's in the war between Gaza against Israel, whether it's discussion of health priorities domestically in Canada, or economic issues, social issues, environmental issues. If people don't work a little harder to get all of the facts on which to make an opinion, then I'm afraid that we're going to continue sliding down this slope of partisan division and really counterproductive policymaking.
Well, you made a lot of good points there. And first of all, like you said before with the CBC, they've definitely progressed into this sort of thing. I mean, we just saw recently, well, over the past little while, they tried to sue the Conservative Party when they should be like doing fair journalism. Obviously, it went to the courts and they didn't go forward with it, rightfully so, because they should have been fairly reporting, but they decided to sue our party, but that's besides the point. And there's so much bias. I mean, I've written about it in our website, check out our articles there, and I've written about it so much, how there's been so much of a divide, and that's the problem. There's so much of a divide that opinions are good, but sometimes they're better left without if you're just reporting on something. And I feel that it's really changed even because of social media. I mean, social media has its good. I mean, our group, we're on social media all the time and we share our stuff there. I mean, that's how most of the people watching, I've looked at our stats here, most of the people that watch these interviews come from Twitter and Instagram. They click on our link there. So really what it is that we need to remember that there's always going to be two sides, and we need to look at everything with that mentality that what we're looking at could possibly be biased.
Yep. Well, that's exactly it. And the thing about politicians and political dialogue, or what people consider partisan combat, is very different. Question period is very different in the theatrics that go into the questions asked by the opposition and the answers or non-answers, deflected by the government of the day. That's very different from the very constructive work that a committee can achieve, where, and I've seen on very potentially divisive issues, committees work where all parties, Conservatives, Liberals, Green, Bloc Québécois, have worked together to try and get to good public policy resolutions. But in a minority parliament, as the one that we have right now, as when we were a conservative minority government, you're almost always in a re-election campaign because you never know when the government may fall or choose to call the next election. So that is a time of real challenge to making good public policy and good government.
Hmm. And as we are seeing right now, I mean, the recent budget that came out, first budget of this government, of this current government since the 2019 election, it came out in April, I believe. Yeah, April 19th or so. It was the first budget, and really it was an election budget with lots of promises of lots of money, really. And I'm sure that this government, they know that they're not going to last too much longer. And that's why, like you said.
Yes. Well, I think the Prime Minister Trudeau has been um, had been hoping through much of the early months of the COVID health crisis to trigger an election as early as last September. But as time has rolled out, the lack of a vaccine, an early vaccine solution to the pandemic and protection of Canadians, I think that now the Prime Minister realizes that it would be very dangerous for him to call an election until all Canadians are vaccinated and we can have an election safely to resolve the political uncertainties and differences on different policy positions. But yes, we're in a pre-election, and that was obviously a pre-election budget with a lot of promises that we believe were irresponsibly made, imposing great obligations on your generation to pay back the debt that is being, in some areas, unnecessarily created.
Exactly. And that is really the sad part, that our generation will be stuck with the bill because of this government that's in the 2015 to 20, whatever, whenever this government ends, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yep.
Because of these past 6 years almost of spending and careless governing and all that, for years and years and years, we will have to pay that back.
Yep.
So the last question comes from the OHSC team, and as we see on the wall behind you, there's lots of memories behind you with Prime Minister Harper and lots of speeches and
Yes.
all that. We want to ask you, what legacy do you feel you will be leaving for the riding of Thornhill and for Canada?
Oh gosh, I wouldn't presume to claim a legacy for Thornhill. It's been a real honor to serve the people of Thornhill over the past 13 years or so. And it has been a wonderful late life adventure for a former journalist. So basically, I'm hoping, well, and I expect this to be the case, I'm hoping to see Melissa Lantsman sworn in and to take Thornhill's seat in the House of Commons and to eventually join the cabinet of a strong, stable, conservative majority government and return fiscal prudence and good government to all of Canada.
Well said. And I think the time is now to get Erin O'Toole in as our prime minister. That there's no better time. We've seen over the past year or so that time and time again, especially with COVID, we've seen problems arise out of the Trudeau government. A scandal again, the WE scandal. We've seen him screw up the vaccines down south. I'm in Ottawa, so like 45 minutes away from me is New York State. And there's so many people there that are living their lives back to normal. And then
That's right.
45 minutes away here in Canada, not even like people that live in like Kemptville, which is like 20 minutes away from Ogdensburg, New York, very close to Ottawa, are living very different lives. And people here in Canada really remember that Justin Trudeau, if he hadn't gone, if he hadn't made the mistakes that he did at the beginning with vaccines, we'd be in a much different place, and there's no better time to get another conservative government back in. It was recently that it was the 10-year anniversary of the 2011 election, and like you said, there was that quote, a strong, stable conservative government coming in and serving Canada with our great conservative policies. So that really is
And
what.
you're quite right. The importance now, and billions, many billions of dollars have been spent to get Canadians properly through the crisis. But hundreds of billions of dollars have been unnecessarily, improperly promised by this government. So I think the importance of electing Prime Minister Aaron O'Toole and the Conservative majority government is, as we say in our campaign platform, to secure the future, to secure the recovery, both the economic and the social recovery of all Canadians, and get Canada back on track for a prosperous future and for a future that younger generations won't be burdened with the responsibility of paying off the mountain of debt and deficit.
Exactly. And that slogan that's in our platforms and everything in the plan, secure the future, is such a great slogan, because that is what we are always looking towards, the future for the young generation like myself and all the members of
Exactly.
OHSCA and everybody. We are the future leaders, we are the future MPs, prime ministers, and all that. And it is because of the work that people like yourself and like future Prime Minister Aaron O'Toole will be doing in the great conservative government that we will be electing hopefully in the next little while, will be doing to create a better future for ourselves and for Canadians that have been here for 100 years going back with their generations, or people or Canadians that have been here for 2 years, whether they came from another part of the world or have been in Canada for generations. We need to create a better Canada for everybody. So our next segment is called Advice for the Next Generation, and we like to speak of young conservatives and how they can get more involved. So we want to ask you, what should young high school conservatives do in order to get more politically active, and what is one piece of advice you would give them?
Well, the first piece of advice I would give to a high school conservative, really to any high schooler who wants to get involved in public policy development and politics, and that is to find a political party of one's inclination, and in your case certainly, and as many students as I could recruit to get involved in conservative politics. And that means joining a local constituency organization, an EDA, the Electoral District Association, and basically engaging, because the older folks in those organizations are looking for the dynamism of youth, for answering the questions that sometimes they take for granted. So I would say to get involved, get engaged in an election year. There's lots of exciting work to do, door knocking, telephoning, for those with computer skills, communication skills, graphic skills, doing the sort of artwork for campaign content, for signs and so forth, for rallies. So basically, get involved, get engaged. My younger colleagues in the Conservative caucus today in Ottawa, there are probably a couple of dozen who got engaged in high school, went and volunteered, were hired by Conservative members to work in their constituency offices or in Ottawa, who gradually climbed the ranks. John Baird is a good example of a previous minister. Pierre Poilievre was an intern in John Baird's campaign office, and eventually on the Hill. So you get involved, and early. Garnet Genuous is another example. Michael Cooper. I could go on, and I won't. So get engaged, stay engaged, and at the same time finish school, develop a career. politics isn't everything. It's a lot. Um, and some of my young colleagues went straight from university into politics. But it's always good to have a specialty, an expertise, a discipline, a profession that can help inform whatever you might do in politics.
Exactly. And there are so many great resources as well. And we talked about technology before, and there's a lot of bad, but there's a lot of good as well. I mean, if
Yep.
you're a conservative high school student in Ontario or even across Canada and want to get more involved and ask questions to MPs like yourself and so many more people that we're coming on having on the show, join our group. We'd love to have you. We love to do lots of things. There's plenty to do. Like Peter said, join your EDA. They'd love to have your voice. And like I say, I'm saying this like every week now, and I'm sorry, but please, please, please get involved in your local nomination races if they're still going on, especially if you're in a constituency that doesn't have a current Conservative MP. That is very important if you have not chosen a candidate in your area yet. That
Yep.
candidate is going to be the person that is going to run for the Conservative Party and possibly be your MP. So if you want a Conservative MP that will fight for you and that you want to see on the Hill in the House of Commons, pick them. It's that perfect time. Many have not chosen their candidate yet.
Yep.
So please get involved. And that is it. We really thank you, Peter, for joining us today. We thank you for everything that you have done in your past 12 or so years now in Parliament and in government and in opposition. We wish you well in everything in your future and your retirement and everything that is going to happen in the next years. And we really hope that everyone enjoyed today's interview. You can look for more videos and interviews coming soon. We have a whole ton of great interviews coming soon. Pay attention to our YouTube channel and our social media channels. We will have all the info soon. Follow our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook accounts at Ontario HS Cons, and look at our YouTube channel, like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. And make sure to look at our website, ontariohsconservatives.org, to learn more about us, to see our projects, and for more great content. And we thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you all soon.